Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everyday Doctrine podcast, and I have a discussion for you today, really a two-part biography, a very short biography, but I'm reading through Philippians in my own personal reading, and I came across in chapter 2, verses 19 down through verse 30, so 11 verses, Paul is commending the Philippian church to honor two individuals. One is Timothy, and the other is someone who came from their church, Epaphroditus. Now, these two individuals are special in our New Testament because they are secondary characters, right? Our New Testament has several primary characters. Obviously, Jesus, the ultimate character. He's not even the character necessarily. He is the substance of the story. And then you've got people like John and Peter and Paul. I think those would probably be your sort of primary characters as far as what they wrote, what they did, how much of the New Testament is consumed with the focus on their ministry. I think those three easily could be your sort of primary characters. But people like Timothy, people like Luke, certainly some of the other apostles, early disciples, though not a lot is written or included about really the other 12 disciples other than Judas, and he doesn't really count. James probably could be one that gets a lot of focus, and rightly so, as the first pastor of that early infant Jerusalem church. But what I wanted to focus your attention on is how Paul describes these two men. And both of them are, I think, models for sensitive Christian ministry, right? That is important for all believers, but certainly those who are trying to be Christian leaders. And that doesn't mean you have to have an official title, but those who are trying to progress in their sanctification, what are some characteristics that you need to be emulating? Well, these two individuals give us a beautiful picture of some things that we can work towards in our lives. So again, Philippians context here, Paul is in prison, he is in Rome. This is one of the prison epistles, and he is writing a thank you letter to the church at Philippi. The Philippian church is in the old Macedonian Greek Empire. It's in the Greek city, sort of taken over by Rome eventually, but named for Philip the Great, which is Alexander the Great's father. And they were very, very proud that they endured, they sort of spanned the gap from Greece to Rome when those powers began to shift from, of course, Athens and Sparta to Rome itself. And a lot of Paul's illustrations center around being good citizens, and that's Paul being creative, because the Philippians, believers and non-believers, were very proud of their Roman citizenship because they were good citizens, and their city was a bustling and thriving city of commerce and trade and culture. Well, this church, Paul is so thankful for. Most, if not every other single New Testament letter, deals with some type of issue. There's some good things happening in some of these churches, but there are some serious needs that need to be corrected. The Philippian church does not have any specific heresy. It doesn't have any specific false teaching that they need to have corrected. This really is a letter of joy and of thankfulness, because the Philippians, out of the goodness of their heart, took up money, took up provisions, and sent Epaphroditus, probably one of the lay elders of this church, if not lay elder, certainly deacon of the Philippian church, and sent him with those funds down to Rome. So up from Greece down to Rome. And Epaphroditus delivered the goods to Paul while under house arrest and cared for him, ministered to Paul. Now, we're going to get to Epaphroditus in a second because he is such a sweet man, right? But let's look at Timothy here. We're in the middle of chapter 2, verse 19. Paul's saying, I hope in the Lord to send Timothy to you soon, so that I too may be cheered by news of you. So Epaphroditus brought news to Paul about how things are going in Philippi, in this church. And Paul is overjoyed to hear about their faith, their love for one another. And early in chapter 1, he prays for them in verse 9. It is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with all knowledge and discernment, that the love that they have would continue to grow for each other. This is a model church for us, and they gave sacrificially to care for Paul. Without getting too much into the weeds of the history, Paul was under house arrest, probably the first time that he was imprisoned in Rome. We know church history tells us that he was beheaded outside the gates of Rome. That is most likely his second imprisonment. And so this is probably his first imprisonment. And the reason why we think it was 2 is because when he's writing 2 Timothy, his last letter that he wrote, probably ever, but certainly recorded in our New Testament, he was very, very sure this is it. Like, this is the end. So he beckons Timothy to come to him quickly. In this sort of first imprisonment, these first prison epistles, he's very upbeat. He is very encouraged. In fact, at the end, verse 23 that we'll get to here in a second of chapter 2, he says, I hope therefore to send him just as soon as I see how it will go with me, and I trust in the Lord that shortly I myself will come also. He very much expects that he's going to be released. So we probably see 2 types of imprisonments. But this house arrest, Paul was not paid for, cared for, provided for food or basic necessities out of Rome's social programs. There was no welfare state for the Roman prison system. Your friends, family, needed to bring you food so that you could eat every day. They needed to bring you changes of clothes. They needed to bring you items to clean yourself with, because if you didn't have that, you were going to get sick and you were going to die. That was very, very common what happened. So this Philippian church, not just sending goods, but sending Epaphroditus to care for Paul, wow, he is moved emotionally and spiritually because of their action. And he says, you know what I want to do? I want to send Timothy to you because I want to know more specifically how it's going. But listen to what he says about Timothy. He says, for I have no one like him, in verse 20 of chapter 2, I have no one like him who will be genuinely concerned for your welfare. That word like, I have no one like him, what he actually said there is, I have no one equally minded as him. There's no one in the world who thought was so ministry aligned to Paul as Timothy. And he says, if I could send anyone, I would send Timothy to you, and I intend to. For they all, everyone else, not, I don't think in his team, but just compared to how Timothy is, they all seek their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. There are so many so-called ministry partners that Paul dealt with, people like Demas and others, that turn their back on him. And he knows the preciousness of having someone equal-minded to him. Verse 22, he says, but you know Timothy's proven worth. And that word proven worth actually is, you know that Timothy was, and here's what Paul literally said, tested by fire. You know his character was tested by fire. We translated in the English Standard Version here, you know Timothy's proven worth. And yes, his character was proven through all of the stuff that they've been through together. You know Timothy's proven worth, how as a son with a father he has served me in the gospel. What a testimony of Timothy. You know what? He was there, he was obedient, he was equally minded to what Paul sent him to do wherever it was, and his character was tested by fire and proven strong. But then we go down to Epaphroditus. And we have in verse 25, I have thought it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother and fellow worker and fellow soldier, and your messenger and minister to my need. So what Paul actually does is, in sending this letter with with Timothy, and he sends Epaphroditus back to Philippi. Chances are that the Philippian church didn't expect to get Epaphroditus back until whatever happened with Paul was resolved. But Paul actually sends him back with Timothy. Verse 26 of chapter 2, for he has been longing for you and for you all, and has been distressed because you heard that he was ill. Indeed, he was ill, near to death. But God had mercy on him, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. So actually what had happened here is on his journey, Epaphroditus had gotten sick. And again, it's a dangerous journey, especially back then. We don't have the ease of modern transportation. A lot of it you're walking. These are dangerous roads. There are bandits, there are thieves, there is sickness, there is cold, there is rain, and you just have to keep on going. And Epaphroditus got sick along the way, and actually he was ill, in verse 27, near to death. And so Epaphroditus here, though, we find from his character that he is so sensitive, in a good way, to the needs of others. He was going here on behalf of the Philippian church to care for Paul. And one of the results is that he gets sick. So Paul had ended up probably having to help nurse him back to health. And Paul was happy to do it because of the love that he has for this church and this man. But poor Epaphroditus, then he hears that the Philippian church, probably sending word somehow, how things going, what's happening, they hear that Epaphroditus gets sick. And they're really bothered by it. They're very upset. Now, we don't know if there was any backstory. Was Epaphroditus maybe somebody that had physical maladies or was maybe more prone to illness? I don't know. I can only imagine, though, if Epaphroditus is somebody who is quite sickly, volunteers to go, you're not stopping me from serving Paul in this way, goes, gets sick, and then the leadership and people back in Philippi are like, we knew we shouldn't have sent him. We're the worst. That's reading in between the lines. But Epaphroditus hears that they heard that he was sick, and he gets even more upset about it because he's like, great, now I've caused them emotional heartache. In verse 28, he says, I am more eager to send him, therefore, that you may rejoice at seeing him again, and that I may be less anxious. Paul has a moment of transparency there. He's like, you know what? I am so thankful for this, but with everything I got going on in my life, I don't need this right now. So I'm sending him back to you. Take care of him, and you know what? You're going to help me emotionally as well. Verse 29, so receive him in the Lord with all joy and honor such men. Believers who sacrifice for one another, who put themselves in harm's way for the good of the gospel, the good of fellow believers. Paul says they need to be received in the Lord and they need to be honored. They need to be esteemed. Verse 30, for he nearly died for the work of Christ, risking his life to complete what was lacking in your service to me. And that's not a criticism by Paul, but he's saying, you all, with all of the intention, you all weren't able as a church to come minister to me. There was something that as much as you may want to, you couldn't do. But Epaphroditus could. So he actually took your ministry care and gave feet to it. And so receive him with joy and honor, and know that he risked his life for the work of Christ, for me, and on your behalf. When he first starts talking about Epaphroditus, look at the things that he describes him as. In verse 25, my brother, my fellow worker, and my fellow soldier, your messenger, and your minister to my need. These two individuals, again, they are secondary characters. Certainly Timothy gets more screen time, page time, than Epaphroditus does. But these two men were certainly willing to serve in the background. They were willing to do what was needed. And they fulfilled it. Timothy's character was proven. Epaphroditus demonstrated his love for Paul, for the gospel, for this church, for what was happening. by risking their lives time and time again so that the gospel may go forth. As I was reading through this passage, man, I pray that I will have even a fraction of that type of testimony, and I hope that's a desire for you as well. So here we go. Here's our application, right? What ministry need is going on right now around you that you need to get involved in, that you need to be actively invested and engaged in? And guess what? Ministry is going to cost us something, as it should, right? So reach out to your local church leadership. Reach out to people that you know and hear, listen, engage, find out what needs are, and then prayerfully try to meet them. It doesn't have to be writing a check. It doesn't have to be mowing a front lawn of somebody who can't do it themselves. But find out what those needs are. Because the gospel only goes forth when Christians bear the burdens of other Christians as well. Timothy and Epaphroditus were on two sides of Paul's ministry needs at the beginning of this letter. And at the end, man, they are walking arm in arm, side by side, back to Philippi, unified in the gospel advance. May we find ministry partners like that, and may we be those ministry partners who have proven character, who are brothers and sisters, co-workers, fellow soldiers, all serving for the work of Christ. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you're interested, you can check out the website, everydaydoctrine.org, where there's a bunch of resources. I will draw your attention to some of those devotionals. I am working on always compiling more, and if you have ideas of what would be an interesting 30-day devotional, let me know. I'd love to address some requests and some needs. But thanks so much for watching. If you want to follow along, whatever platform that you listen to this, thanks so much for doing that, and we'll continue the conversation in the next episode. But until then, take care, and taking a little hint from this letter to the church in Philippi, receive people in the Lord with all joy and honor them who are engaging in faithful Christian ministry.